Before we begin, and you'll be familiar with this by now, I'd like to invite you to take a slow breath in, and a slow breath out. Notice your body. Notice the weight of yourself being held by the chair, the floor, or wherever you happen to be. And just allow yourself to arrive. Today, we're going to explore something that transformed not only my relationship with my daughter, but my relationship with myself. We're going to talk about becoming the anchor. When our children are struggling, it's natural to believe that what they need most is the right solution, the right therapist, the right medication, the right school, the right intervention. And while all of those things can absolutely have their place, what I discovered was that underneath all of it, my daughter needed something even more fundamental. She needed me. Not a perfect version of me, not a constantly calm version of me, not a version of me that always knew what to do. She needed my presence, my steadiness, my willingness to stay connected. And if I'm honest, that wasn't easy, because every time my daughter became upset or distressed, I became upset and distressed too. When she was anxious, I became anxious. When she was hopeless, I became frightened. And when she withdrew, I panicked. I didn't always do this on the outside so that she could see, but there's no doubt that it was happening inside of me. When she talked about not wanting to be here, every protective instinct in my body came alive. I thought that was love, and perhaps in some ways it was, but what I began to realize was that I wasn't actually helping either of us. But what I began to realize was that I wasn't actually helping either of us. I was reacting to her emotional weather rather than becoming a stable presence within it. And one day, somebody introduced me to a metaphor that changed everything. The difference between a thermometer and a thermostat. A thermometer reacts to the temperature around it. If the room gets hot, the thermometer reflects heat. If the room becomes cold, the thermometer reflects cold. And it's got no influence over the environment. It just simply responds to it. But a thermostat does something entirely different. A thermostat helps regulate the environment. It notices what's happening without becoming overwhelmed by it. It creates stability. And as I reflected on my parenting, I realized I'd become a thermometer. My emotional state was entirely dependent upon how my daughter was doing. If she was having a good day, I felt hopeful. If she was having a bad day, I spiraled. My nervous system was constantly being pulled around by circumstances outside of my control. Can you relate to that? Perhaps you found yourself checking your child's mood before deciding how your day is going to be. Perhaps you've noticed that your own sense of well-being rises and falls according to how they seem. And again, it's understandable, but it is exhausting. And more importantly, it places an impossible burden on our children. Without realizing it, they begin carrying responsibility for our emotional state as well as their own. The invitation is not to become detached. The invitation is definitely not to stop caring. The invitation is to become anchored, to become the emotional adult in the room, to become the person who can say, this is difficult, this hurts, and I'm still here. I think one of the deepest realizations of my parenting journey was that I was often trying to become the parent I wish I'd had. Not because my parents didn't love me, they did. and they did the best they could with what they knew. But emotional attunement wasn't something many people were taught. Feelings weren't always welcomed. Certain emotions didn't always have a safe place to land. And so, like many of us, I learned to carry things alone. I learned to cope. I learned to manage. I learned to survive. Then I became a parent, and suddenly I was being asked to offer my daughter something that I was still learning to offer myself. Presence, attunement, emotional safety. And that was humbling because I realized that becoming an anchor wasn't about learning a technique. It was about becoming the kind of person who could stay present with discomfort, my own discomfort, my child's discomfort, life's discomfort, without immediately trying to escape, without fixing, without controlling, without collapsing. And that's what anchoring really is. It certainly is not perfection. It is not being calm all the time. It's not never feeling afraid. It's not always knowing what to do. Anchoring sounds more like, I'm scared too, but I'm here. I don't have all the answers, but I am staying. Or this is hard, and we don't have to face it alone. Because some of the most healing moments with my daughter happened when I stopped trying to be impressive. I stopped trying to be wise, stopped trying to say the perfect thing. And do you know what? I simply sat beside her. And sometimes we talked and sometimes we didn't. Sometimes I had no idea what would happen next. But she knew I wasn't leaving. And that matters more than we often realise. Children don't need parents who never wobble. They need parents who know how to return, because we will all lose our centre sometimes. We will all become overwhelmed. We will all react. We will all say things that we wish we hadn't. But the question is not whether we stay perfectly regulated. The question is whether we know how to come back. Can we repair? Can we apologise? Can we reconnect? Can we find our way home to ourselves again? Because every time we do that, we show our children that difficult moments are survivable. We show our young people that relationships can withstand imperfection. And we show them that being human is okay. Before we finish today, I'd like to share a few practices that help me become more anchored. Not because they took away all my fear, but because they helped me return to myself. Sometimes it was placing a hand on my heart and taking 3 slow breaths. Sometimes it was stepping outside, taking my shoes and socks off and feeling my feet on the grass or the earth. Sometimes it was calling a trusted friend. Sometimes it was just having a good old cry. Sometimes it was as simple as sitting quietly and allowing myself to feel what I was feeling rather than trying to push it away or bury it. And sometimes it was just asking myself, what do I need right now? Not what my child needs, not what everybody else needs. What do I need? Because we all know an empty cup can't pour, and a dysregulated nervous system cannot offer safety. So, before we close, I'd like to invite you again into a reflection. I'm going to invite you to take one more breath and ask yourself, when life becomes difficult, what helps me return to myself? What grounds me? What steadies me? What reminds me who I am? Perhaps it's nature, music, prayer, meditation, movement, a friend, a pet, silence even. Just notice what comes. What reminds you who you are? And then ask yourself, what would it look like for me to become a little more anchored this week? Not perfect, not enlightened, not endlessly patient, just a little more anchored, a little more connected to myself, a little less pulled around by fear, and a little more able to stay. I'd like to leave you with this thought. Your child does not need you to be unshakable. They do not need you to have all the answers. They do not need you to be perfect. They simply need to know that when the storm comes, there's someone beside them who knows how to return to solid ground, someone who's willing to stay, someone who's willing to keep coming back, and that someone can be you. Thank you again for being here. And in our final lesson together, we're going to turn our attention to something many parents forget completely. You. Because in all of this, you matter too. I'll see you there.